If you could be any animal that you imagine, what animal would you be? Well, for some people, it's more than just imagining. They actually believe that they are this animal, at least spiritually. In today's episode, I got to talk to a member of the Otherkin community. To be more specific, the Dragonkin community. From this conversation, I got to learn how it feels to be more like a fantasy creature like a dragon than their own physical species of a human. I end up asking what this whole Otherkin community is like and how you manage to go up to a person and tell them, I am a dragon. I really feel like I learned a lot from this conversation, and I actually hope you do too. I'm Trevor, and this is Out of Somewhere.
So, my name is, well, I go by Dragonkin Draco or Draco on the internet, but my name in reality is Chris. And essentially, I am a member of the Otherkin community. What that essentially means is, I want to be very clear about this on a non-physical level. I identify as a non-human, and in my personal identity, it's a Western dragon, a green Western dragon. So online, I'm pretty active on the Discord side of the community, and I'm on some forums. And something I'll probably talk about a little bit later is I've actually, along with a few other members, founded a new wiki project for other members of the community, such as Therians or Alterhuman, where anyone can gather their information and.
All right, I'm going to immediately slow you down because me, as someone completely oblivious to all this, am already just sunken in. So used like three different terms right there. You got Otherkin, Therian. I've heard that one.
So what a Therian, or the proper way to say it is actually Therianthrope.
I'm going to get that
wrong.
That
is essentially is. These terms, actually, believe it or not, are kind of disputed sometimes. What some people think a Therianthrope is someone who non-physically identifies as an animal that's known to exist or known to have existed on Earth. But some members of the community think that it's more how you feel, like if you're more animalistic in your identity. So it's a lot of these definitions really aren't that agreed upon sometimes.
It's also, not gonna lie, it's not super clear either. It's like kind of vague at the end of it. So which one do you most formally identify with?
Well, I don't identify with the Therian at all, because like Otherkin, it's more geared towards creatures that have not been known to exist on Earth throughout Earth's existence.
Okay.
And even this one's disputed a little bit, but that's more or less the go-to definition that almost everyone agrees upon.
Okay. And so, just super explicit, how exactly do you mean you identify as a dragon?
It's kind of, a lot of people, it's hard for a lot of people to like understand what that means, because like obviously I'm not physically a dragon. Although I wish I was.
I mean, who wouldn't, you know?
But it's kind of like, for me, it's kind of based on a spiritual type thing. Some people it's not. And some people, they like, the two big parts of this community are like people who believe for spiritual reasons or for like other reasons, like psychological reasons. And there are a few other reasons, but those are the two big ones.
All right, so explain the difference between psychological and spiritual difference for you.
For spiritual, it's like the general consensus is that you have like the soul of something. It's like I do believe I have the soul of a dragon, and I also believe I reincarnated from a dragon in a past life. And so that's more or less the spiritual one, but the psychological one, it's like brain wiring and stuff. So like people who identify this way believe like there's a certain, like their brain is a certain way that makes them identify as these things. And what identify, it means like,
yeah, that's a pretty loaded term right now, I guess.
It's kind of like a self identity. So like what you picture yourself as. So like deep, like I believe deep down, like on a baseline level, I am a dragon. Obviously that's not physical, like I've said before, but it's kind of a hard concept to grasp. I'll give that to you.
Especially
But
for someone new to this topic. Um, for sure. So how does that affect you? I guess like
um it is pretty weird sometimes. Like I've mentioned this in some of my videos online. And by the way, everyone who's listening, I do have a YouTube channel, also known as Dragonkin Draco. But it's kind of weird how it manifests itself. So like this, a lot of this stuff, again, it sounds new to people who don't know what it is, but I kind of have these things that are known in the community as like shifts or like for me, phantom shifts are noticeable. So like I can sometimes almost feel like I have wings, even though they're not actually there.
kind of like phantom limb syndrome for people who have had like legs cut off, like kind
Yeah,
of feeling
kind of
like it's
like that.
there. Is that like
Exactly.
a
And it's
painful sort of thing, or
not
just like
painful, just incredibly noticeable. And it
almost like you can feel the weight
fluctuates.
of a wing like pulling on you?
Yeah. For me, the most common one is horns, actually. In fact, it's pretty much 24/7 that I feel that one, and it is incredibly noticeable.
How large are your horns? Are they like stereotypically like giant, like kind of
They're not,
demon?
they're like medium size. I don't really know exactly how to gauge
for,
it,
for
but
the
like,
for the visual viewers, like if you had to, like I don't know, like stop
uh,
me,
about there or a little bit lower,
like
probably, that would be if for scale, like if it were
right.
scaled up, that's where it would be.
Granted,
Um,
if you were like completely dragon, that's
yeah,
like where
like
it would be.
yeah, if it were like, because I believe my dragon, like if I were a dragon, the dragon that I was in a past life was a lot bigger than a human, obviously. So for scale, that's essentially in reference to the head. That's how big they would be. Another thing is there's these things called mental shifts, and a
Okay,
lot of people in the community, what a mental shift is it's like your mind kind of takes on more characteristics of what you identify as. Like you start kind of acting like the thing you identify as more.
how often is
Um,
this sort of thing
this
for you
for me is
personally?
pretty mild, to be honest. Like I get it usually at night, and it's like I notice it. Like I'm getting more like this is kind of like embarrassing, but I kind of like want to walk on like all fours and stuff.
All
But
right.
I can control it very well. Like even like sometimes when I was younger, this happened a lot. I growled at people I didn't like, and I still have the urge to do that, but I have learned to control it. But for some members of the community, it's not so easy, and a lot of people have a lot more intense mental shifts where they can't control it, and I feel bad for them honestly because it's
It's just
not very
sounds like a
socially
struggle.
acceptable
Yeah.
to growl at people or walk on all fours in public. And I'm kind of happy that I've been able to not do that. Like I've been able to master masking it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Like I don't know, keep it behind closed doors, as they
Mm-hmm.
say.
Because like I'm gonna be honest, this a lot of like otherkin stuff is not socially acceptable.
Yeah, I
Um,
was kind of that was one of my questions leading into this. Like how open are you about this? Obviously, you're willing enough,
very not
willing
open.
to like come on here. But yeah, like to your day to day, like how close do you have to get to know someone be before you bring up like, hey, by the way, I'm a dragon.
I think I've told a total of like 3 people in my entire life about this in real life. Maybe a little more than that, maybe 5. Like my mom knows and she's fine with it. My mom actually has similar spiritual beliefs to me
Really?
that kind of evolved. I think it's called convergent evolution, where like this is like where 2 people reach the same conclusion. Like I'm just using the evolution and analogy there, but like my mom and I didn't really talk about our spiritual beliefs, but they kind of ended up being the same
Okay.
somehow, which is kind of weird. But
So
anyway,
like, yeah, what does she
like
believe? she believed
reincarnation and stuff like
reincarnation.
that, which is where what part of my identity as a dragon is based on. So she was able to understand it pretty easily. Um, I am very reluctant to tell people about this part of my identity. Um, I like you'll see online some members of the community will like wear what they call gear, which is like they'll wear tails and they'll wear like ears and stuff or horns. And I honestly have to commend them for their confidence. I am not that confident,
Hmm.
and I would not do that personally, just because I'm. It's like I said, it's not socially acceptable. It's not really understood, and there's can be some negative ramifications if people were to find this out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a decent chunk of the population that don't take kindly to being different, to put it as generally as
Exactly. Yeah.
possible. Um, Especially something that to most people would feel far fetched, like being a dragon, or for seems like most people attach themselves to wolves or foxes tends to be
And
pretty
honestly,
common.
I get it. Honestly, it does sound far fetched. It's just for me and the members of the community, it is very real. Like
So,
I'm self aware about this kind of stuff.
so you mentioned things like gear. So, does this community have any kind of overlap with something like? Because I mean, whenever someone hears ears and tail, they immediately think like furry community.
Yeah,
Um,
there is a pretty big overlap. Like they're distinct communities. Um,
mhm.
but a lot of members of the Therian, Otherkin, and Alter. I don't think I defined Alter Human, but it's kind of
No,
like an umbrella term for
that's a
all of
very
these
new one to me.
identities. It is very new. But it's essentially it's being proposed as an umbrella term for all of these communities because, like I said, the definitions of Otherkin and Therianthropy are disputed. So people, and I like this idea, the Alter Human umbrella term. It's just having an umbrella term that doesn't alter the existing definitions. But anyway, like there members that I know, members of the Alter Human, Otherkin, and Therian communities that I do know tend to be furries, and I myself am one as well, but not. I'm not really involved in the community. I just consider myself to be a furry.
Hmm. All right, so
But they are distinct.
yeah, so what is the most clear distinction between the two for those
With
who are still
furries,
unclear? Yeah.
usually it's like anthropomorphic animals, and you're not actually identifying as them. You're just essentially like role playing as them with your persona. Um,
So
with
for
Otherkin and
like
Therianthropy,
yeah, so for like furries, it's a whole separate like character. Like they're either their day to day self or they're this other character.
yeah,
Whereas for
and they've
you,
made up the character. Like
right?
it's explicitly created by them. With this, with Otherkin and Therians, it's kind of like almost like a thing we can't control. I did not choose to identify like this. Like, well, obviously anyone chooses to label themselves as something,
Mm-hmm.
but these feelings that I have, like, they kind of just came naturally. So, like, a
How
lot of
when did
people,
this sort of start? Like you said, like whenever you're younger, you'd get angry with
it's
someone, you want to like growl or even maybe even roar deep
it's been a
inside you.
lifelong thing for me. The longest like the earliest memories, like when I was like 3 years old, like I felt like I should have been a dragon. You know what I mean? It's so weird, honestly. A lot of people they don't like there's another here's another new term
Okay.
in the community. There's a term called awakening, which means it's when you realize you are another kin or a therian or some sort of identity like that. For me, that never really happened. It was kind of like
It was very
super
gradual.
gradual, like, and it was from such an early age. Like I really got got concrete knowledge of what I looked like as a dragon when I was 8 years old, and it's been like that ever since.
It's always stayed just right on the dot. Like
Yep.
that's what who I am.
Yeah, like I knew I was like kind of like draconic or like dragony earlier than that, but like I've really nailed down like what type of dragon, what I looked like, and all that stuff when I was 8 years old. Believe it or not, and it's been like that ever since. So for me, it was very early learning about all this stuff.
That's interesting. And so you say you're able to control this a lot to your day to day life, thankfully.
Hmm.
But in one of your videos, you actually mentioned occasionally feeling a mental dysphoria sometimes. What is that like
Yes.
for you?
So
Because
what
this is something that I'm sure a
that's
lot of people have no experience with.
yeah. So that is different than shifting. What that
Right.
is, species dysphoria is like feeling uneasy in the body that I'm in. So like I said, I've mentioned in this, I feel like I should have been a dragon, and sometimes that gets me down. And that's kind of what the like a lot of time that gets me down. Actually, I feel like I was born in the wrong type of body. I'm not comfortable sometimes with my human body, and that's what more of what the species dysphoria is. And that is a lot harder to control.
How
But
do you
again,
end up
that's not
trying to deal with
really
that?
my the best method that I have to deal with that is actually to hike. I'm a big hiker.
Okay.
Um, and just being out in nature makes me feel better, like camping, hiking, any of that kind of stuff.
Now, is that
Like I
just like
said
a
earlier,
mind freeingness or feeling like you're more in a sort of natural habitat? Could be tied to
both
that sort of thing.
actually. Like
Okay.
it gets rid of the stress of everyday adult life. Like I don't have to think about the news or like work, even though I love my work. Electrical work is my dream job, but I can like tune out all the annoying and negative stuff, but I can also feel more in tune with my dragon side in nature. And where I'm located is actually a great spot for this because, like I said, I'm right on the Niagara Escarpment, so I can walk 2 blocks and get to the forest. So, and I do it almost every day.
Hmm.
I have a dog who likes walking as well, so I have an excuse to get out.
So, being in nature, do you have any other kind of dragon tendencies? I don't know, like stereotypically, like hoarding gold. Like you happen to have a rich
Oh, I'm a
stash
massive
somewhere.
hoarder. I am a massive hoarder. And
What
like
kind? What
a
kind of
lot
stuff?
of people, um, electronics. Like I know it's not exactly like I do hoard stones and stuff like that as well, like typical dragon hoard stuff. But I am just a hoarder in general. Like I collect a lot of different things.
What
Um,
what is your stone collection like? Sorry, I don't know anything
um,
about stones. So,
I it's not really anything special. It's literally just stones I find when I'm hiking, like stuff that I find that
how large
looks
is your
nice.
stone collection?
Quite large. A lot of it's actually outside in my backyard. I found a lot of nice granite stones last year out at the beach, and I put them out in the garden. But
Hmm.
it's pretty big.
If you
I
had to
also
put a
collect.
number, how many stones have you picked up throughout your
Oh my
years
god.
as a dragon?
Recently, probably a couple hundred, like in the last year. Um, I got a lot of them last year when I went camping, actually, because I found some really nice ones.
What
Um,
makes it what sticks out to you about a stone?
the shininess,
The
honestly.
shyness.
Like if it's shiny, like granite, I took a lot of granite home. I like really shininess is the appeal for me, and granite tends to be pretty shiny. Um,
Fits the bill, I'd say.
yeah, I also do collect coins. Actually, I have quite a collection. Um, I have in Canada. I don't know if you guys ever had these in the U.S., but in Canada we used to have 50-cent coins. Um, like you know how you have like quarters and like
Mhm.
dimes and stuff. We used to have 50-cent coins. So I have a bunch of those. I have a U.S. and Canadian silver dollar. I have a lot of old Italian money. I have money from like I even have the actual like Canadian millennial coin collection that came out in 2000. The whole
Hmm.
boxed set of them.
Wow.
And again, I guess the appeal for that is shininess.
Shiny,
That's a pretty typical dragon thing to collect
just
is
shiny
coins.
value.
Hmm. But I like I said, I don't know. I actually the electronics I tend to collect are shiny too. I've noticed that there's a trend there as well. Um, like I one of the things I collect in the electronics field is like old vacuum tubes. So like
Vacuum
you know
tubes.
those radio tubes and stuff, and I kind of just like the look of them to be honest. Like the glass ones.
Where do you
That
put all these things? Just like
um,
in your closet layer that you
I have
got,
a
or
A lot of them I do put on display in my room actually, because a lot of them can stand upright,
Hmm.
the vacuum tubes at least. But as for my other electronic junk, I just put it in a cabinet,
So
out
I
of
want
sight, out of
to.
mind. Because my mom gets mad when I bring home stuff.
Are you protective of it?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
um,
Has
I'm
that ever
protect
led
like
to dragon tendencies coming out? Like, have you ever mom tried to like take one of your coins and you like growled back at her?
not really. She doesn't really like once it's in the house. She's like, what can I do? But I don't know. Like I said, I'm very good at controlling all this stuff, so I'd never really
Of
lash
course.
out on
Yeah.
people or anything.
Right. So speaking of interacting with people, uh, you mentioned that you've only come out as a dragon to a very small handful of people in real life. What is their general reaction to this when you tell them?
Well, with me, I only tell people who I have a pretty good idea are going to not lash out at me. It's like usually I'll let them initiate the conversation. Like so, and like it's weird because like one of the people I told was actually a friend I met at school,
Hmm.
and he, for out of nowhere, started talking about spiritual stuff, and I was like, he seems kind of into the same stuff that I'm into. Maybe I can discuss this. So I did, and the reaction was quite positive. Um,
Yeah, whenever you brought up initiates the conversation, I'm gonna lie, it kind of ticked something in my head. I was like, don't think too many people are bringing up asking you if you're a dragon or not.
well, no, I mean
Um,
like they talk about something relatively
right, of course.
related.
So yeah, so just generally all positive reactions. Like, does this change how you can act day to day with them? Like, can you be more open about this? Like, if you have
Yeah,
some kind
actually,
of
like
dysphoric
like
moment or something.
how I'm feeling and stuff like that about it. Like if I'm feeling down that I'm not physically a dragon, I can talk to them about it and that kind of stuff. And it honestly is nice to have real people in my life who know about this because a lot of people aren't so lucky. Um, there's a lot of like harassment and stuff online for people who have this type of identity.
For sure.
And I actually have not really got harassed online, thankfully, knock on wood, about this.
Yeah.
Um, but I think I've noticed for a time, like cringe compilations were a big thing, but not really anymore. They don't really make new ones. So I'm hoping that keeps going, that they don't make cringe compilations. But it's nice. It honestly is nice to have a supportive people in my life.
No, it's good. Everyone needs that, no matter
Mm-hmm.
your background. Um, so something that you touched pretty heavily on was in some of your content is differentiating this mindset from communities, like you said right here, what with like it's separate from the furry community. Meanwhile, in your content, you made a big point about the misconception about how Otherkin can be tied to like the LGBT community.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, is that something I just wanted to clarify, or is that something that you feel like could also be included? Like Otherkin could be
Um,
an additional O to the alphabet mafia we're building.
well, I'm a proud part of that mafia as well. I mentioned in the video I am part of the LGBT community, but I think I just wanted to distinguish them because they really are not like they're kind of similar to the untrained eye. Like identifying, like people would think, oh, I transgender people identify as the opposite gender or a different gender if they're non-binary, and then Otherkin identifies a different species. It's the same thing. The concept is somewhat similar, but the reasons are distinct and like the kind of like aspects are distinct. So like I just wanted to, and this is a pretty this consensus is pretty it's the consensus in the community that in both communities that they are separate communities and there's
Mm-hmm.
not really any effort to combine the communities even though there is a lot of overlap. Like a lot of otherkin that I know are part of the LGBT community as well. It's still distinct and most members of both communities like it that way.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Um, I think it's just because like I said, the identities are kind of distinct from each other. They're like not really the same thing because the LGBT community is more about like gender identity,
Hmm.
sexual orientation, that kind of stuff. The
But
Otherkin
species
community
is
is like
not something that.
about species and stuff like that. Um, and there is, like I said, there's some overlap. Well, there's a lot of overlap actually. A lot of members of the Otherkin community are LGBT. Um, but also some members of the community, of the Otherkin community, they believe that their Otherkin identity actually influences their gender or sexual identity, which is completely valid in my opinion as well. But it's still a distinct community.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So, do you think that there's a large portion of, call it society as a whole, who may be part of this otherkin community but not really realize it because they haven't come in touch with it? Or do you think everyone's similar to you, where like deep down they always kind of know?
Well, I think a combination of those two things, where people kind of know, but they don't really know of any way to express it. And this is a theory I've had for a long time. I don't know if I've mentioned this in any videos, but I think a lot
Go
more
on.
people are otherkin than people realize. Like even like one person that talked to me, she's like an elderly lady, and she was like, "Oh, I feel more like a fox than human, and I feel like I was a fox in a past life, and I deep down I feel like I'm a fox." That's pretty much what therianthropy is. But obviously, she's elderly. She doesn't know what the internet is. Well, she knows what the internet is, but she
Yeah.
doesn't use it.
So it's hard
So
to
like
find that community, hard to
that's
know
pretty
that
much
it
that's
is a
pretty
thing.
much bang on what a therian is. Like identifying as a non-human earthly animal. And like you don't have to believe in past lives to be a therian. It's more about what you identify as. But
Hmm.
it's a pretty common belief. And the fact that she said that she feels more like a fox than a human, that's the thing that really makes it analogous to what therianthropy is. So I do think a lot more people are otherkin or therian than we realize.
What makes you think so many people are drawn to these like fox and wolf type characters? Because that seems to be by a large margin the most common.
It is the most common, but there's a lot. Like if you get deeper into the community, there are a lot of people who identify as. It's very diverse. With foxes and wolves, I honestly don't know, but I kind of have like some theories on at least the wolf
Okay.
one. Um, assuming these people believe in reincarnation and they think that is the reason why um they are Therians. Um, a lot of wolves were killed back before they were protected species. So that like theoretically they could all reincarnate into humans if they subscribe to that belief. You know what I'm saying? I
Right.
know
Yeah.
that this is not really
As much as
obviously
like
this is
any
not
other
proven.
animal, though, right?
No, wolves were actually killed a lot more. They were hunted viciously.
I mean, there's
Um,
also like, um, not necessarily disagreeing with you, but like, I mean, mayflies die every single day. Meanwhile, I don't think a lot of people
I've
ever
seen
think that
people
they're
actually in the community um, identify as insects and stuff like that.
really
Yeah, really.
what.
It is very diverse, and I guess like a lot of the people who identify like wolves and stuff are common, but I think they've kind of like it works in a way like I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain, but like it's they become more popular. I don't know. That's just my another theory that I have.
Do you
Like the
think it's
internet amplifies certain things,
right?
and because there are a lot of members of the community who are not just wolves and stuff. It's quite diverse. And dragons are another quote unquote popular one. Um, but like I said,
Is
there's
is there any kind of like like stack ranking to these sort of things? Like, I mean, I don't know. To me, Dragon kind of stands out like big, powerful, kind of a dominant figure within these groups is what would stand out to me. Or is everyone just kind of like we're all part of the same group?
that's more of like what it is. There really isn't like notions of superiority among different species in the community. At least not that I've seen. Um, but like, and even with like wolves and stuff, like people who identify as like insects, for example, the wolves in the community won't say like, "Oh, I'm better than you because I'm a wolf." Well, I'm sure some do, but like the vast majority don't.
Think
So
that
it's
comes
more
from
of
their
like,
like underlying wolfness of just a bunch of pride hiding behind
yeah,
it come through. Of
I don't know, honestly. I'm not gonna like assume
course.
where people's intent comes from, but on it, like there's the community. Once you get actually into the community and like look at who's a member, it is very diverse.
Hmm.
A lot of the stuff you see on like Google and stuff is just wolves, but like I said, it is diverse. There's a lot of different species. Every species you can even think of, there's someone who identifies as it.
Hmm. So we definitely hit a lot of like common misconceptions. Is there anything like it's just off the cuff that you feel like is misunderstood but isn't really like talked about the community?
Um, just in general, like it's kind of a misunderstood community. Like a lot of people, like they think we're all, well, a lot of people think we're all like kids,
A bunch
um,
of kids just playing
like
make
role playing and
believe.
stuff like that. But like that's not the case. A lot of like the people I interact with in the community are like not kids. They're like in their 30s or 20s. I'm in my 20s. Um, a lot of people I interact with are in their 30s. And like there are kids in the community, but and there's nothing wrong with kids being in the community. Like don't get me wrong. But like sometimes the people who are malicious actors and trying to get like cringe compilations made and all that stuff, they'll
Mhm.
single out the kids who are like, for example, some kids I've seen will post their like mental shifts on YouTube. And like I would not do that with my mental shifts because it's embarrassing to me at least. But they'll take these and put them in cringe compilations, and then everyone will
Think that's something that should
see.
be significantly more normalized. Like this is something that someone's going through and
I don't
probably
know.
looking for
I
support,
think that
or
people should be supportive of it. And I don't think people should like make fun of people for
of
this.
course, yeah, for
Um,
nothing.
because like honestly, my when I gauge if something's right or wrong, I usually think of if it's hurting someone else, and if it like so like if I'm like identifying as a dragon, like mental shifting or it's like does that really hurt anyone else? I don't think it does.
No, like
So
as long as
why?
you're not going to a mental shift and trying to burn down your neighbor's house, like
Yeah, exactly. Which I can assure you, zero members of the community do. All and like there's a lot of misinformation too. Like people will make fake, like people will pretend to be members of the community and like say outrageous things, and then it'll be picked up and put in cringe compilations. But you got to be careful what you read online because a lot of it is fake.
a lot of it's just misinformation trying to.
Well, I would say it's more disinformation, to be honest. Disinformation is like the difference between mis and disinformation is intentionally misleading
Mm-hmm.
people. And I'd say a lot of it is intentional to try to get like to make us the butt of a joke or something like that.
So I'm curious more about your personal experiences with this, and like, so is mentioned like going out into the woods brings you closer to it, as well as have high tendency for collecting things. Is there anything else that you do that um, may either like help relieve dysphoria or just bring you closer to your dragon self? Because I feel like that's something like if you're comfortable with it, you should be able to express sometimes. And what's your any other outlets you have to do that?
Well, for dealing with dysphoria and stuff, I also do meditate a lot, and I do enjoy, and like even if like you're not part of the community, meditation is a great way of relaxing and becoming mindful, and I use that a lot to like reconnect with myself and relieve stress and all that kind of stuff. But for outlets and like expressing this, obviously I have the internet to express this, which is nice. Because it would be a lot worse if this was all bottled up and I couldn't talk to anyone about this stuff.
Right.
Um, I also do subtly, um, I don't know, like I express the fact that I'm at least like people will see that people who know me know that I really like dragons. Like everyone who knows me knows that. I have a tattoo of a dragon on me. I have like a dragon on my keychain. I have a dragon statue sitting next to my computer right here. I have like it's everywhere in my life. And I kind of think like I can do this stuff and people won't see my dragon tattoo for example and say, "Oh, he's Otherkin." Because a
Right.
lot of people have
Just
dragon
someone who
tattoos.
likes
It's like
dragons.
yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like a covert way of expressing it.
Has this affected relationships at all for you? Like coming up to a person being like, would would you spiritually either just need a partner to also be a dragon, or just be accepting of that? And like, what would that mean for you?
The baseline for me was be accepting. I don't really require anyone in an intimate relationship to be otherkin. Like the community is incredibly small. Like the people who know that they are.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, the likelihood of me actually finding someone is low. And like honestly, it's
Just other
not.
kin in general, not even.
Yeah, like I've never, other than the lady that I've talked to, the old lady, I've never really met one in real life. um, but like even if they were all over the place, even if the otherkin were like majority of the population, um, I wouldn't require it to be in a relationship. I would just want someone to be accepting.
Of course, as everyone would hope so.
Hmm. I think that's just the key. Like people like, and this is the same thing with LGBT identities. Like I just wish people were more accepting
Mm-hmm.
because even like I'm scared to like come out to some people as gay as well. Like again, my family knows,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I don't really, unless I have to, I don't really advertise it. You know what I mean?
Right, and as some would argue that you shouldn't even have to, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I don't know. I don't really make an effort to conceal it. I just am. I be myself,
yeah, I think
and
that's the best way to do it. So how if someone was kind of on the brink of identifying their other kinness, if someone's like, I feel like I'm never quite right as human, but I don't exactly know what I really am. Do you have any sort of advice to get this person to figure themselves out? Really, like,
well, the general consensus, and I agree with this, is you should like kind of like do some soul searching, look to see what like try to find out some like not exactly what you are like. Because I know if you're struggling, and I tell people, oh, just find out. That's not good advice. Trying to like narrow it down a little and then do some research based on that. You can like and
what kind of
meditation
research
for some people, like
would?
researching like different species and researching like the community and stuff like that. Like if you like think, oh, potentially I'm starting to think maybe I'm some sort of canine or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to jump to conclusions and say I'm a wolf. Maybe go research some different species and see which one resonates with you the most.
When I say
Um,
resonates, I think that's tied a lot to like habits, like.
habits, but like, and it's not even like resonating with you. It's like what you feel you are. Um, so habits, like, and stuff like that. But even like I tell people, you can't let the quirks and stuff like that define who you are. Like I am not a dragon because I like hoarding things. Like you can't use that. Like you can't say, "Oh, I like digging in the mud. I must be a dog." Then that's not a good indicator.
Hmm.
It really boils down to what you feel inside and what you really feel you are. Because you can be otherkin and not have any of these quirks. You don't even have to really shift to be otherkin.
Hmm.
You just have to feel deep down that you are this in a non-physical sense. Another good thing to do is research like the community itself. It's like see what the definitions are. And a lot of people confuse relating to an animal to identifying as an animal, for example.
Okay,
And otherkin and hmm?
define the differentiate those a little bit more for me and those home.
So essentially, what like relating is like I really relate to like wolves, for example.
Okay.
That's a little bit short of I feel like I am a wolf, and they are distinct. And with Otherkinity and Therianthropy, the definition of it is like you have to feel like you are these things, identify as them on a non-physical level. So like they are, and I think there's a bunch of different terms for what relating to it or identifying with is. I think it's called other-hearted, but there's a couple other words for that. So like if you are other-hearted with dragons, it means you identify with dragons. Like you feel some sort of a relationship to them that's stopping short of identifying as one.
Okay.
And this stuff is quite complicated for people who are just getting into it.
I mean, just in this short conversation, connecting the dots, it becomes a real web.
There's so many terms that people have to like learn, and there's so many definitions and stuff. And I've like finding a good online resource is really key to like learning all this stuff. And a lot of good, like when you're first trying to find out stuff about yourself, I would say go to like don't go to the social media webs. Like go to social media, but like sometimes, like I said, they can be full of misinformation and disinformation. A lot of the best communities that I've been a part of are actually forums dedicated to these topics.
So
and specific groups.
Right. So like, do you have a dragon specific group that you communicate with? Like, do you feel like you connect more with other dragons? Is this a large portion of the community that you're able to like sectionalize like that, or?
Well, I interact with a bunch of different, like I'm in a bunch of different groups, but like I don't know. I find I can interact with anyone pretty well, not just dragons. I am in some dragon exclusive groups, but I'm also in some broad groups that basically include anyone.
When you bring up these dragon exclusive groups, are these like literally exclusive that like I don't know, you kind of have to be like vetted by someone, be like
no,
yeah,
no. You anyone can sign up, but it's more geared towards dragons and stuff. I don't really agree with like forcing people to like you can't join this group if you're not this, this, and that. Like that, I don't think that's right. I think it should be open to everyone, but you can be like more geared towards a certain group. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course, makes sense. So I'm curious if you're willing to go a bit more into detail about you as a dragon, because that's very interesting to me to see how your representation as a dragon, like you mentioned the species breed, sorry, don't know difference.
Well, I think I identify as a Western dragon, so like the ones with 4 legs and 2 wings.
Okay.
So kind of like the standard dragon look. I believe like I'm green. I have yellow eyes, 2 horns, spikes on my back, that kind of stuff. Like I've drawn myself as a dragon.
This is
and
a very
I'm not really a
common thing
great
I've
artist.
seen in like furry communities or other similar communities having their characters drawn and like materialized. Is that something that helps you really connect with your dragon side?
It helps me feel better that I've like learned, like have a visual of it, because I've had the visual in my mind for years, like I've said, but I wanted to get it on paper, or in my case on technology, because I drew it on Photoshop. But I'm not really the greatest artist around. I'm not by no means a professional artist. But I am proud of my drawing that I did. It turned out actually a lot better than I expected.
Yeah.
With like my extremely limited art skills in my secondhand drawing tablet from like 2000.
Well, I'm sure it looks great. It's super great for you that you are able to materialize this side of you.
I mentioned this earlier in the show, but one thing that I am working on, and this kind of ties back to like people researching and stuff like that. I'm working on a new wiki about Otherkinity and the related communities. It's called otherpedia.org, in case any of your listeners want to check it out. And essentially, in case your viewers or listeners don't know what a wiki is, it's like Wikipedia, where anyone can sign up and edit it themselves. So it's not really curated. It's kind of like community built.
Right.
And I think that's a great thing because
Was there
there's
not really
really
something
no
like this before?
there
Like,
are, but I don't know. They are kind of like certain groups have their own wikis and stuff like that. So like there's one for Therianthropy, there's one for Otherkinity. For this, I kind of wanted to make it like all encompassing. And but when I say I mean me and the other people who've been working on this, because it was not a solo project. This is a lot of work to get online actually.
sure, it sounds like a big project. Especially getting traction enough to like build it out. I'm sure like
Yeah.
being one of the founders, you have to contribute a lot of your time to provide some sort of content there to draw others in to help build it out further.
Yeah, and I did manage to get it on Google actually,
Nice.
which was quite tough with MediaWiki, but I'm glad, and I'm hoping that people can sign up and essentially contribute because it's a lot of work to like type out the articles. And I think that the advantage of having a wiki is anyone in the community can contribute, make their voice heard, and give any good information they have. It's not really like some authority writing everything because there really is no centralized authority in these communities.
Mhm.
It really is community driven. And I think having an encyclopedia like this where members of the community contribute themselves,
And
then
speaking
it
of
would create
community,
more of
I'm
a
kind of
Hmm?
curious. Do you have any like I don't know, call it success stories within the community, like someone finding themselves, or um, I don't know, just general positive stories that might stick out with your experiences within this community?
um well I've seen a lot of people in the communities that I've been in discuss like talking to their parents about it and stuff like that and getting good reactions. I've seen way more positive reactions than negative reactions among the people that I talk to. So like in the communities that I'm in, people will say like, "Oh, I told my mom or I told my dad or blah blah blah," and they reacted positively, which I think is great. Because there's always those horror stories like in this is I've seen more of this with people coming out as LGBT,
Right.
um where people will get kicked out of their house and stuff like that, and that's
Mm.
always a big concern. And I'm just glad to see that that hasn't really been happening, at least in the communities that I've been in.
Nice. No, that's definitely good to hear. Because yeah, I feel like it's a definitely a big gap for a lot of people, especially parents having their child be like, "Hey, I'm a wolf," or "I'm a dragon," or "I'm a insect." Like, at least for the LGBT community, they at least have some sort of grasp on what that means. I
Sometimes
mean,
though I think that can actually act in like to the LGBT's detriment, because if people say like, "Oh, I'm a wolf" or something, they might get a like, "Oh, okay." But if someone reveals to their homophobic parents and the parents know what LGBT stuff is, that can actually sometimes elicit a or it can like make the reaction much worse. Like
whenever they're coming out
I
as a
honestly
wolf,
think
that is, or
I don't know, like because people that's kind of like a for a lot of people it's like a pie in the sky um thing. Like I'm sure people would react negatively to both, but I don't know. LGBT stuff has much more of a history of being like really like discriminated against and like enshrined in the law to be discriminated against. So I'm honestly like sometimes I'm more like fearful of people finding out about my LGBT identity than my otherkin identity, just because there's a lot more knowledge of it, and sometimes that can be to its detriment.
hmm,
But again, these experiences are different for everyone.
right, right, definitely makes sense. This is all just really fascinating. Having coming from zero knowledge about this sort of thing, and then hearing about all the different stories and experiences and like what it really means to be an otherkin, because you see it and like I feel like most people just directly tie it to like, oh, you have this character for yourself versus um no, like that's not a character, that's just how I am, who I
That's who I
am.
am. And a lot of people think it's like mental illness and all that stuff, which there's actually a very specific definition of what a mental illness is, and this does not fit the definition. Mental illnesses have to like really severely cause like impede your life. It's like they have to cause real bad, like really bad problems. And for everyone that I know in the community, they can go about their life pretty normally with
Hmm.
this kind of stuff. Like everyone that I know who's an adult has jobs, they contribute to society and that kind of stuff. So it really like it's not like people think like, oh, if you identify as this, um, you are essentially just like a basement dweller who doesn't contribute anything to society. Like, you know what I mean? There's that trope,
Right.
but it's not true.
What does it mean to be a dragon? But how a backstory into the whole other half of you.
So like if people meet me, I at least I don't think they could tell that I was an otherkin because I like I said I don't really disclose it to a lot of people. But I don't know, like even like some things in my previous jobs, kind of like a lot of people have reported that they like if you're a dragon, you like being up high because of like flying and that kind of stuff. And I actually used to work in a theater as a lighting and sound technician, and being up on the lighting catwalk, I kind of liked it to be honest. Like up
Yeah.
high above the theater,
Have
it
you
kind of
ever
just felt right.
have you ever like thought about doing something like I don't know, skydiving or bungee jumping or something that
I've
would
wanted
like
to do. I've done bungee jumping before, like not like real bungee jumping, but like I've done something similar to it. But skydiving, I'd like to try one day. There's a skydiving place not too far from where I am, so maybe after COVID is over, I'll see what's going on.
so shifts that you call them, right?
Yeah.
Um is this something that is like triggered or something that just kind of comes on? Um
For me, it just kind of comes on like clockwork at night. To be honest, the mental shifts at least, the phantom shifts, like I said, the horns are pretty much 24/7. The wings and stuff is kind of just random. For me, there's like at least none that I've really pinpointed yet. There's not really any triggers for it.
and then when you are in these shifts, it's just like I'm curious if you could explain more of the mentality that's happening rather than if you can go any deeper than just like I feel more like a dragon.
It's very hard to explain, but like I feel like I want to like walk on all fours and like I don't know. It's easier to demonstrate than to explain, but I don't want to demonstrate it on
That's
camera.
no, I completely understand. Um, for sure.
It
Like
just it is kind of like I know like saying, "Oh, I feel more like a dragon," is like, "Oh well, what does that mean?" But it really does feel like I don't know. It's hard to it really is hard to explain. Like I feel like more like a dragon. I act more like a dragon. Like I want, like I said, want to walk on all fours and I want to fly and stuff like that. And like it's hard to explain, but that's honestly how I feel.
is fire breathing also in your
Yeah,
repertoire?
yeah. I on
Is there
my
any kind of like attraction
reference
to that?
sheet drawing. What'd you say?
Is there any kind of like attraction to that fire? Like, is there a
I
comfort
don't
with
know.
it?
Like
Maybe.
I like fooling around. Like when I'm camping, I waste matches like crazy. I just strike them, throw them in the fire pit, strike them, throw them. But I think that's more of a fidgeting thing because I know a lot of other people who do that. But I don't know. I did explicitly put on my like drawn reference sheet that I drew that I can breathe fire because I do believe that my dragon form does have that ability. But I don't know. I'm not really. I don't know. I'm more like out of all the things, I'm more interested in electricity.
Hmm.
But that's probably just because of my career goals and stuff like that.
Right. I mean, like as you said, like although you are dragon, like you're also you.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And it's not like it is a huge part of my identity, but it's not my entire identity. Like there's humans and like anyone's multi-dimensional. Like we have a lot of different parts of us and they sometimes relate better to each other than others. Like not everything I do really has to relate to my dragon identity. Like and that's just how it works essentially. Like when I sit down and watch TV or something, dragons don't do that, but that's still something I do because I'm also physically a human and I live in a human society. And like there's certain things that humans do and that no otherkin identity will trump over some things, like talking, for example, and stuff like that.
So in being a dragon, is there something that you feel like is do you feel like there's misrepresentation of what that is compared to how you feel like you are as a dragon,
A
or
lot of people who are like trolls online think that we're physically the other animal, which is not
yeah, of
true.
course
We are
not.
like I'm obviously a human,
Yeah.
physically. Pretty much everyone in the community agrees with this statement that these identities are non-physical identities. It's like you'll see comments online that say like, "Oh, well, if you're really a wolf, go live out in the woods."
It's like
Yeah, well, they're first of all, I would actually take up that offer because I'm pretty into camping. But second of all, they're they're in a human body, so they can't just go live like a wolf. You know what I
mhm.
mean?
Yeah, no, of course. Makes
Like
complete
it's
sense.
really
It's
this other Kennedy and therianthropy is really just a personal self identity, and it's like different belief. Like I said earlier, I believe reincarnation was a method, like or like a. It's kind of like an explanation I give. But even like people who like think, oh, I reincarnated from a wolf. But if that reincarnation from a wolf doesn't really resonate with you at all, then you really don't have like you're not considered a Therian. Like it's more of like the definitions of Therians and otherkins are really just if you really, really deep down feel like you are these things on a non-physical level for whatever reason. You just have to feel like these things on a non-physical level. You have to identify as them. And a lot of people use reincarnation as an explanation, including myself, but it's not mandatory. There's so many reasons why people can identify this way.
I'm sure that clips with a lot of people in various communities, not even just otherkin.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, if you guys were if anyone listening were to meet me in the street, you probably wouldn't be able to tell unless you could recognize my voice or something.
Mhm.
But like I'm just like I'm a normal person living a normal life who also thinks that deep down on a non-physical level I'm a dragon. When you like it is like like kind of hard for people to grasp, but when you think about it like that, it really isn't that big of a deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like just because it not everything, every part of your life, even if it is a large part of it, doesn't have to outwardly affect everything else.
And honestly, if people like want to like modify their bodies and stuff is to like better reflect their identity, good for them. That's I support that in 100%. I
Is that
support
common in the community?
not really.
Is it a common desire?
I actually do like I support transhumanism, which is again another new word that a
It
lot of people
is.
probably haven't heard. But what transhumanism is like modifying using technology to like better the human condition. And there's some members of the transhumanist community who would like to make it possible one day in the future. And let's not kid ourselves, this is not happening for a long time, but somehow be able to modify our forms physically into other animals. And I would, if that technology were available, sign me up. I would take that chance right away.
100%. You got a chance to be transformed to a real dragon. Just
Sign me up. I'd be first on the list. But realistically, I don't think that's going to happen for a very long time, if ever, to be honest. Um, but as for body modifications, I think body modifications are pretty common, like tattoos and stuff. But like intense body modifications, from what I've seen, are not super common.
a lot of
Like
it's more so gear, right?
yeah,
Um,
and like I said, this is more of like a deep personal identity, and for a lot of people in the community, not like body modifications, like essentially transforming yourself with tattoos and stuff into that animal as far as you can go, really isn't that necessary. You know what I mean? It's kind of like just a personal identity that you, on a non-physical level, are these things. But if people were to want to get as close as they possibly could with modern technology, then go for it. I think that should be supported.
so if you could have one modification to make yourself more dragon-like in this fictional hypothetical, which would you choose?
That's a very hard one. I don't know. I'd probably pick wings, to be honest.
Honestly, I think
If
that's
I
the right
could,
answer.
if I
Right.
could get wings, yeah, that would make me feel a lot more right.
I almost thought like maybe like the horns, just because you said you feel so strongly about those. But I mean,
I don't know. The
give.
horns, I feel them, but functionally, I think wings would be a lot more useful.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, if I had the option to take wings, I would too. Definitely make my commute a lot more enjoyable.
I'm sure, like, I don't know. I haven't really asked many people in the community about what they would think about transhumanist technology changing them into their like other or their kin type or stereotype, which is just the word to describe what you identify as.
Mhm.
Um, but I would take that chance in a heartbeat. If someone came to my door saying, "Would you like to try this new technology?" I'd say yes, right away. Take me away.
All right, cool. I think that's a
And
fun
again,
note.
that is a big philosophical conversation that I won't really get into because there's like ethics, like is this right to modify people like this? And I think it is, but some people don't, and there's probably going to be legislation surrounding this. So it's a big issue, but hopefully everything works out and they don't do any harm or anything like that.
Right. Well, I think that's a fun uh, image or future to hypothesize and think about a bit more. So I think we'll end it there.
All
Uh,
right.
Call it a show. Where can people find you and the stuff you're working on?
So if you go to otherpedia.org, that's basically what me and many other people are working on right now. Um, I'm also on Discord. In case anyone wants to message me, my DMs are always open. My name is at Draconiciaro, number sign or hashtag or whatever 0001. It's pretty easy to remember. Draconiciaro hashtag 0001. Um, and you got anyone who wants to send me an email can reach out to me at draconiciaro@draconiciaro.ca. And yes, when I bought the hosting for Otherpedia, I also bought a couple domains for myself.
Nice. Well, hope a bunch of people go find you and go discover more
Oh,
about something.
one more thing,
Yep.
my YouTube channel,
Yes.
Draconiciaro.
Of course.
That's probably the most important one. How could I have forgotten?
All right.
Um,
And I'll
but
provide
yeah,
a bunch of links in those in the description, and hopefully you get a bunch of traffic that way.
all right. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed this discussion.
Thanks a bunch for watching. If you enjoyed it and want to hear more stories and experiences of people who I pull out of somewhere, then be sure to subscribe to the show. If you want to interact with me and the show more, then hit me up on Twitter at OOS_pod, Instagram at Out of Somewhere Pod, and even on TikTok for some highlights at Out of Somewhere. Catch you next time.